Before we get started, Schiit did send this out for a review. They are not paying or asking me to say anything good or bad. All thoughts and opinions are my own. Hey, what's up guys? I'm Josh, and today we're going to be talking about the Schiit Lokius. This review is going to basically mirror the Schiit Loki review that I did a while back. Basically, this review is a matter of circumstances. Now, what are those circumstances? Well, things like what you're using your system with, whether it's an analog system or a digital system, are going to matter a lot here. Now, while this is a better product than the Loki, it also costs more, does add some additional features for that cost, and they may be worth it to some users. But it ends up having the same Achilles heel as the Loki does, where if you're using a digital system like a computer, I think that EQ is simply better. Not only is it more granular for its control and its frequency adjustments, but it has a lot more options for what you can do with that control. And of course, it's free. Now, similar to the Loki, it isn't to say that this product has no use case, but it is to say that it is not going to be for a lot of users because of how they choose to use their systems. Now, where this system comes in, same with the Loki, is more of an analog system or a person who just really prefers to use a physical product versus an EQ. I like a physical product, but I cannot deny the utility of EQ is just a little bit better for computer users. But for analog users, something like this may be a requirement if you want to get good, decent tone controls with a good amount of cleanliness in the system when you're not using the tone controls. So as far as the physical construction of this follows the same build quality that we've seen on Schiit, which is pretty decent. It doesn't really have a more updated design like something like the Lear Plus does back here, which I'll be reviewing in a future video, so subscribe if you're not for that. But the inputs and outputs are very simple, RCA and XLR for both. Then you have your series of 6 tone controls on the front and your series of input switches between XLR and RCA, and your switch between the EQ adjustments that you make on this and just a pass-through. Notably, even if this is off and completely unplugged from power, the pass-through will work, but the tone control adjustment will not. Now, honestly, for this build, I actually only have one gripe, and that's the fact that if it's on the bottom, it's actually quite hard to get your fingers around these to adjust the actual dials. And also the dials are a little bit close to each other. That also makes your adjustment capability a little bit limited just for handling. This doesn't really affect anything. It's just sort of a minor annoyance when using this thing. Now, for an analog system, I do think that this can insert nicely for a $300 upgrade to something like a Hifi system. So for example, I'm using a system that is digital for my Hifi speaker system, but it is not on a Windows computer, so I can't install EQ or anything like that. I have to go off basically a digital signal that cannot be changed for any sort of tone control. So a system like this would insert nicely into an already expensive Hi-Fi system without adding too much extra cost, but it allows me the flexibility of adding the benefits of tone control. So for those of you who are new to the hobby, tone control can be a godsend to certain systems, headphones, and speakers. A couple things that it allows you to do is correct errors in your existing system. It also allows you to play with the sound and either have more of a reference sound or a fun sound, or allows you to kind of play with different sound signatures to find out what you really like. So on the bottom, you of course have your different bass adjustments between your sub bass and your mid bass. Then you have your mid-range adjustments between your lower mid-range and your higher mid-range, and then some treble adjustments. Now, a couple of examples of how this is very beneficial. Those SVSs, for example, they are very capable, but they sound very different in different size rooms. They can really have a lot of bass, maybe even too much bass for smaller rooms. And so a tone control like this, where you can just turn down some of that sub bass and just reduce some of that bloat that you might get in a more closed in small space, that's going to be great. But vice versa, instead of adding a subwoofer for a larger room, I might just add a tone control and just boost the bass a little bit compared to what it does naturally. So that can sort of account for different room circumstances and different systems in different areas. Now, for a headphone system like this that's a little bit more closed in, I think a headphone like this greatly benefits from a Lokius. This is an incredibly detailed headphone. It's a Hifi HE1000 V2. It costs an arm and a leg at about $2,000. And it's, again, very detailed, but that comes at a slight cost of being a little bit bright. So having some treble adjustments where you can kind of reduce that treble heat a little bit, still maintain a lot of that detail, it can fix a lot of issues with stuff like that. Now, the reason why I recommend EQ instead of this, if you can use EQ, is because you can get way more specific on which frequencies you want to adjust, how large or wide you want that bell curve to be. And you can also make more adjustments to more frequencies than just sort of the 6 bands that this has. Just because there is a better option for certain users doesn't make this a bad product. It's actually a fairly good product if you have the specific circumstances that it requires. It's just that most people these days are not running analog systems and can run some form of EQ adjustment. Now, if you can, that's my recommendation, use EQ. But if you want tone controls, while the market is fairly limited, actually, there's not a lot of tone controls, they do make a Loki Mini, which I've reviewed in the past, which is a smaller 4-band kind of tone control adjustment, but it is cheaper. And then they have a Loki Max, which is way more expensive, like $1,000 more, has a lot more audiophile appealing features and kind of components used in its build. And it's also a lot bigger. There are some things to be aware of with this thing. Similar to the Loki, if you start really pushing each of these bands all the way to the max, they do start to distort a little bit. Now, a personal recommendation on use case here. I think the name of the game here is not major, massive changes to the sound. I think that some minor corrections and some minor additives, some minor reductions are going to be the best mix of good sound quality without the sound sounding really distorted, but you also get the benefits of changing the sound signature. So you can use it however you want, but I personally wouldn't recommend cranking the knobs all the way to the max for any specific band here. Another thing I was thinking about, and I just wonder if it's possible, is a dynamic range expander. The reason why I was thinking about this was there's a lot of headphones that are very good, but they are like compressed sounding. Some of the Dan Clark headphones kind of seem like that to me. I wonder if it's possible to make some sort of dynamic range expander that would make those sound a little bit more vivid and lively for their dynamic range and not so compressed. Yeah, just open question to the world. Okay, so my conclusion, again, similar to the Loki review, I think this is a good product. It just has a very, very specific use case. I think Schiit is aware of this. I don't think I'm bringing up anything new. So I'd say that for most of us, including myself, this is not really going to be super useful, but for the right person with the right system, I think that this is going to be a pretty decent product. Thanks a lot for watching. See you guys next time.